my name is Don Dagenais. I'm one of the preview speakers for the Lyric Opera Guild, and I'd like to welcome you to this preview of Verdi's Il Trovatore, which is the second production of the Lyric Opera of Kansas City to take place this season in the gorgeous new Kauffman Center for the Performing Arts. Let me tell you a story. Back in 1853, when the great Italian composer Giuseppe Verdi was working on the score for Il Trovatore, it was based upon a rather tempestuous Japanese novel by a writer named Gutierrez. The novel contained lots of very dramatic scenes, and these fired up Verdi as a composer, but also led him to consider that he needed to develop sort of a different method of opera composition. Up until that time in his career, Verdi had fairly closely followed the traditions of the bel canto composition, the beautiful singing style represented by Rossini and Donizetti and Bellini, his three great predecessors. But for Trovatore, he needed something more. He needed the blood and thunder, dramatic, hit him over the head sort of Italian compositional style. And so he began to develop a whole new way of writing music for opera. And he decided to invite a French critic to his apartment to see what the critic thought about this new music. So his critic sat down, and Verdi turned to the piano and played a tune from Il Trovatore, and then turned to the critic, and the critic said, "Oh, it's trash. It's just trash." And so Verdi sat down and played a second tune and turned to the critic, and the critic said, "No, you don't understand. Our public has tastes that are much too refined for this sort of thing." And so Verdi nodded, played a third tune from the opera, turned to the critic, and the critic said, "It's just never going to work. This is much too simple, much too straightforward. Our audiences are used to something much more refined than this." And Verdi smiled, leaped up, embraced the critic with both arms, and said, "You've told me just what I need to know." And the critic said, "Well, I don't understand. I just told you that I didn't like the music." And Verdi said, "Of course. I'm not writing the opera for critics. I'm writing the opera for the audience, and they're going to love it." And so they did. And that was really the beginning of Il Trovatore. Now, Il Trovatore, as I said, is based upon a rather melodramatic Spanish novel, and you need to know a little bit of the background before you get into the story. The backstory of Il Trovatore really starts about a generation earlier. This is set against the background of the Spanish civil wars in the 15th century, and there's a Count de Luna who has two young sons. An old gypsy hag finagles her way into the castle one day, and she's caught leaning over the crib of one of these babies, thinking apparently to do it damage. She's seized, dragged off, thrown on a bonfire, and burned at the stake. Well, her daughter, a gypsy lady, is there, who herself has a young baby, and in anguish at her mother's horrific treatment, she steals upstairs in the castle, snatches the baby out of the crib, runs down, and hurls the baby onto the fire, burning the baby along with her mother. Well, she discovers to her horror moments later that she has thrown the wrong baby into the fire, and it was her own son that she killed, and the baby in her arms is the boy stolen from the castle. Well, she somehow evades capture, retreats into the gypsy encampments, disappears, and a generation has gone by. Now as the curtain opens, we have the other son of the Count, who's always been told that somewhere out there his brother might be around, who is seeking for his brother. We have the old gypsy lady, she's now turned into a gypsy hag herself, who has raised this other son as her own, and he has become a glorious singing troubadour. That's the name of the opera. His name is Manrico. And then we have the hag herself, who is a major character in the opera, and there's also a lady named Leonora, a beautiful lady who's the love interest in the opera. She's being pursued by the Count, but she really loves this mysterious troubadour, whom she has heard outside her window. And so these are the four major characters of the opera: the Count de Luna, the troubadour Manrico, the two of them are brothers, but neither knows it, the love interest Leonora, and the old gypsy hag Azucena. Now, when you cast this opera, it's rather difficult because these are four very, very difficult roles to sing. As a matter of fact, an opera director one time was saying, "Well, it's really easy to put on a Trovatore. All you need to do is find the four greatest singers in the world." Well, that's pretty hard to do. But the opera is full of wonderful musical highlights. You can tell from the plot, fabulous opportunities for arias, for duets, for choruses. Really, Il Trovatore from beginning to end is almost a highlight film of great music from Italian opera. Now, the lyric opera has found four excellent singers to sing these roles. For the baritone, we have Raymond Burdenko, who is a fine singer of dramatic Italian roles, who has honed his skills mostly in Europe, so he's not well known in this country. He's sung in France and Germany and England, but last year he won the Domingo competition. Our tenor is Rafael Dàvila, who sang Rodolfo in La Boheme for the Lyric Opera a couple years ago. He was also the Pollione in the Lyric Opera's production of Bellini's Norma a couple years ago, a major role. The soprano singing Leonora is Michele Capalbo, who is a Canadian soprano, really just now gaining a wide reputation for singing some of the most difficult Verdi roles, including the role of Aida, which is really her calling card, and she's sung with many outstanding opera companies around the country. And then the probably best known singer in the cast is the mezzo-soprano who portrays the old hag, Nancy Maultsby, who is famous around the country for singing a number of great mezzo-soprano roles. So these four singers, lots of wonderful tunes. It ought to be a truly thrilling evening of Italian opera at the Lyric Theater. Il Trovatore opens on November 3rd, closes on November 11th, and I hope that you can join me there.